Disney's Hercules versus Monkey came out recently, and how was it? Well, if any of you know my feelings on this matchup, you know that I was incredibly hyped for this. Seriously, those 2 weeks were the longest 2 weeks of my life. I was just really excited for this. Not only did I really grow up on Greek mythology, I had like a little book full of Greek myths and everything when I went to Greece, that I got when I went to Greece when I was 11, I think. It was back in 2013. So, I've been a fan of Sun Wukong ever since I saw Overly Sarcastic Productions' Journey to the West videos on Journey to the West, of course. So, two characters that I have a deep connection with. So, naturally, I was probably gonna like this matchup just a little bit more than most people might. But, how is the episode exactly? Is it good? Is it bad? Or is it just in between, like most middle-of-the-road episodes are? Well, let's find out. For starters, the analysis. It was really solid. The editing was on point. I really liked how it ended with them explaining how Hercules became a legend and how Sun Wukong finally found his home among the heavens. That was really cool and cute and adorable, and I love it. I also really like the jokes, like the cutaway gags in this episode, with Dummy saying basically he's carrying the whole show while holding an entire universe on his his body, and Boomstick basically just trying to act all calm, but then getting visibly affected and screaming out in pain with a poison. Chad's delivery in that line was perfect. It was hilarious. I actually laughed out loud. It wasn't like a ha kind of laugh. It was more of a ha kind of laugh. It was still funny, just not the funniest thing I've ever seen, but it was still good. Don't really have much to say about the analysis. The music in both analysis was really freaking good. I mean, good lord. It was just amazing. But really, most of what I have to talk about comes from the fight. So this is just a seamless cut to the fight part of the episode. The animation starts out with a scroll opening and then a mountain being illustrated. And can I just say, this is where most of the hand-drawn budget went. The backgrounds for the stuff on the scroll are legitimately, they look amazing. Do they look better than Tetsuo's mutation in Magneto vs. Tetsuo? I don't know, but the kind of Chinese artist looking style that they went for the backgrounds, it works really well for this episode. And we'll see how this affects the actual episode later on, because trust me, the stuff on the scroll is just really cool. Then we get our first look at the sprites, and admittedly, I was a bit sad to see that we weren't doing like a 3D style similar to All Might vs. Might Guy, which was kind of what I wanted, like a fast-paced, action-packed animation with like swooping camera angles, all that kind of stuff, because that would actually work really well with this episode, in my opinion. But the sprites still look really cool. I can't really say which character has the better sprites, because Sun Wukong, his sprites look a little more adorable than anything, but Hercules, I think Herc's is a little more detailed than Sun's is, but they still look really cool. The voice actors also did a incredible job. Blythe Mellon does a fantastic job with Hercules, kind of taking this stoic, honorable warrior kind of voice, while Alex May does is I'm sorry, but he kills it with Sun Wukong. He kind of sounds like a character Steve Blum would voice. I mean, if you know what Steve Blum's voice sounds like if you watched him as Vilgax in Ben 10 or Heatblast in Ben 10 or Ron from Gurren Lagann, you could definitely hear that he sounds a lot like that. Wukong sounds a lot like Steve Blum here, but it's not. And Alex May does a fantastic job with the character, and he gets across the freaking trickster nature of him so well, and I love it. He does a fantastic job in this role. I know I keep repeating myself, but I can't stop. It's so good. I'm sorry, I can't stop gushing about the voice acting. It's just really good. Anyway, after Hercules threatens Wukong with giving him the golden apple, Wukong reluctantly obliges. But Hercules... This episode plays into a lot of strong suits, but I really think that showing off Hercules' intelligence is definitely one of them. It's not the strongest strong suit, but it's definitely one of them. We'll get to the strongest strong suit later if you know what I'm gonna talk about after this part, but yeah. Although I am a little confused about how Hercules knew it was just Sun Wukong playing a trick on him and giving him a fake apple, because he didn't see Wukong replace an apple, and also how would Wukong know that he needed to make a fake apple? I mean, I guess you could do it just in case a random monster appears, but from what we've seen, he was kind of just alone on the mountain, just with an apple that he had. So I find it a bit weird, but oh well. Shows off that Hercules isn't an idiot, and as long as characters aren't idiotic, unless they're meant to be idiotic, then I am all for that good stuff. Anyway, after that, Wukong pulls his staff out of his ear, cute little attention to detail there, I might add, and swings his staff around. I would say its name, but I'm scared that I would butcher it, so I'm not going to. And when he does, we see that it has these little ink trails that follow them, kind of like they're being painted on the scroll as the fight goes on, which is such a unique way to add a weapon trail. It's not just a freaking blurred line that moves super fast when a character swings their weapon. It gives this episode its own style, and it helps show the fact that this isn't taking place in the real world. It's kind of taking place on this piece of paper that an artist is probably drawing. Maybe it's a guy who is a fan of both Chinese and Greek mythology and is drawing this, and as he does the fighting, he adds the trail on with a brush, which I think is a pretty cool. It also happens when the characters make contact with each other, but there it's just an explosion of ink, and I don't think it looks as well as the weapon trails, but it's still pretty cool. It gives this episode its own unique flair, and I love it. I very, very much love it. Hercules then extends his staff and... Sorry, let me try that again. Wukong then extends his staff to hit Hercules, and then which breaks Hercules' sword. But then Herc uses Wukong's staff to pull him in and uppercut him into the top of the scroll, which actually moves up to reveal a bunch of clouds, which is such a clever use of the environment that I think it actually puts Dio vs. Alucard to shame with its use of the environment. Because Dio vs. Alucard not only had the Dio grabbing knives out of the sword shop or whatever it's called, but it also had the two using the hands of a clock to have a giant sword fight, and that's clever. But Hercules hitting Wukong up to the top of the scroll, which extends it, revealing clouds, is such a clever use that I honestly don't really have any words. It's just such a cool thing. It's so creative. This episode is just brimming with creativity. Wukong then gives us this wonderful facial expression along with an extended arm that makes it look like he's almost dabbing, but not dabbing exactly. Anyway, he hops between a bunch of clouds and eventually creates a bunch of clothes of himself by ripping out a bunch of his hairs and just tossing them to the wind. To counter this, Hercules basically fires a crap ton of arrows at super speed, but the way it's animated is a little weird and a little bit too fast and kind of looks a bit janky in my opinion. But it's still a clever way to show that Hercules, well, he isn't dumb. I mean, most of his stories are literally not just of him being super strong, but also outsmarting and using his wit to his advantage. Anyway, Wukong then uses some of his clones to basically turn into a bunch of birds, and then they turn into snakes to restrict Hercules' arms. But then he uses the freaking things he used against the Stymphalion? Is that what they're called? The big metal birds. And hurts Wukong by basically just clapping them together, which, given that he's a monkey and has super hearing, probably hurts a lot. After Hercules basically gongs Wukong to the ground of the scroll, we see a pretty good character moment for Wukong where we see he's on his back, but he's laughing and he's having fun while this fight is happening. Because this is totally in character for Wukong, as far as I know. Like, before he became the victorious fighting Buddha. This like, thrill for battle is what Wukong likes. He's very kind of energetic and full of himself, and he really likes having fun. And the fact that he's having fun while this fight is happening is just a really cool character moment for him. But then it's immediately followed up by Hercules just bashing Wukong's brains out, and then Wukong just stands up headless and just starts reminding, and then brings up the time he basically rampaged through heaven because, well, a monkey's gotta do what a monkey's gotta do, I guess. This is just a really funny moment, and I love it so much. It's like that time he got his head cut off, and then when his head wouldn't come back, he just grew a new one. Wukong then goes into his 3-headed, 6-armed fighting war mode. Sounds like I'm doing a sales pitch. And we get a pretty funny moment from Hercules where he actually brings up the fact that he's fought a being with multiple heads. And his line delivery of just, multiple heads. Of course. Was just, that is comedy gold. Probably, I know I said that Alex May killed it with Wukong in this episode, but that line delivery from Hercules, that is the best line in this entire episode. It was so funny, and I loved it. Anyway, after we get a brief scuffle, which is a bit lacking, unfortunately, I really would have preferred if we got more from this. Still pretty cool, and we got to see more ink trails, but again, it kind of did nothing. It ends with Hercules firing 3 Hydra poison-tipped arrows into this version of Wukong, and given that there's 3 heads, that kind of makes a little bit of sense if you think about it. But it doesn't, because it turns out to be a clone, and those arrows are basically wasted now. How fun. The real Wukong comes out and does what I was hoping the episode would do. A reference to Lego Monkey Kid, baby. Let's go! It's basically what happens is Wukong shoots down, or extends his staff all the way to Hercules, and then it grows to this massive size and crushes him. And then we get to see what is probably the funniest shot of this entire episode. We just see the scroll that the staff is on, and we just see the staff extend past the scroll. Like, the scroll is just in this empty void, but the staff is just so big that it just goes up. Again, pretty creative use of the environment. I loved it. Sun Wukong then sits on his giant staff and proudly laughs to himself, which is, again, great character moment for him, and the voice acting is superb. But then Hercules, in a show of just raw strength, just lifts it up and just yeets it. Then they get into a clash which leads to, honestly, the most underwhelming part of the episode. And I'll explain why. After the two clash, we basically zoom out to see these two celestial bodies of both Sun Wukong and Hercules. Now, this is a cool idea and concept to show that the god forms of both of these two characters are kind of just watching over the fight, and my guess is they're probably taking bets about who's gonna win. And this is a really cool idea and concept, but my problem comes with them visually. I can barely see, I can barely make out what's going on. I mean, I can tell that it's supposed to be Sun Wukong and Hercules, but Sun Wukong is just way too bright, and you can't make out any of the finer details. Same goes for Hercules, but you can still see some of his muscles, and like the strap, the lion of the Nemenian lion's pelt that goes over his left shoulder. But other than that, you can really not see anything. Also, the scroll is also in this like sort of celestial form, which doesn't really make any sense to me. I feel like if they just kept it as like this giant scroll, it would have been better, and it would have made a little more sense. But other than that, it's cool. I just wish they were kind of a little more, like, the lighting wasn't so crazy, because this is actually blinding me and it hurts just to look at. Maybe if the lighting was a little darker and also the colors were a little different to show that they're two different gods, kind of, then it would be visually they'd be like a little more different and a little more diverse, like showing like Wukong in this like ethereal gold color, and then Heracles in this, maybe he can stay blue, but maybe you can give him like the green color or whatever, I don't know. Maybe add a little bit of orange to him, keep Wukong as like another color. Just, it's, the scene is a little bit jarring, but what comes after is way cooler than what we get here. The two begin their final clash, which isn't their final clash, but whatever. And honestly, the build-up is really cool. The narrator, oh yeah, there's a narrator in this, I forgot to mention that, but the narrator, he brings up the fact that Hercules is summoning all the might of Olympus, and that Sun Wukong is summoning the power that's equal to heaven, and when they clash, there's a moment, like there's like a couple seconds where you don't know who won until the narrator goes, "The Monkey King was victorious!" To which we cut back to what's happening inside the scroll to see that Sun Wukong has won the battle. AKA Goku finally getting his first win in Death Battle. Sun Wukong then jumps away, ready to give the apple to Tripitaka, and the narrator closes out with a nice line about east and west. A nice touch to a fantastic episode, which, in my opinion, really should have been the mid-season finale instead of Boba vs. Predator. That's just me, and I have a lot of wrong opinions, but this one is not one of them. This is the right opinion, and if you disagree with me, then you're wrong and I'm right. That was just a joke, by the way. Everyone can have their own opinions. Everyone's entitled to their own opinions. So, with all of that, what is my opinion on this episode? Honestly, it was phenomenal. It was so amazing. The voice acting was stellar, the animation was entertaining, the analysis was entertaining, the jokes were funny, aside from one joke, but I'm pretty sure you all know which joke I'm talking about. Everything about this animation and this episode in general was amazing. Only, I do have a few problems. For starters, the ending, it was cool, but again, the fact that I could barely see both Sun Wukong and Hercules, or Hercules, or however you say it, just goes to show that the lighting needed to be toned down just a little bit. As well as that, there were a few, like, the arrow shooting was a bit weird and a bit awkwardly animated. And the final clash wasn't actually the final clash, if you know what I mean. I feel like the final clash should have been the big cosmic scale final clash and not the one we got in the end. I mean, the final clash was still pretty cool, but like with the ink explosion and everything. And while I'm on that, the death was also kind of lackluster. I mean, it's not bad. It wasn't the worst death we've seen in the series, in my opinion. That would probably go to Akuma in Shao Kahn versus Akuma. But it's definitely up there with the most mediocre deaths. So, with all of that, I give this episode a 9.5 out of 10. I'm sorry. I couldn't not give this episode a 9.5 out of 10. It's just an episode. I think, you know what? I'm gonna say it. This is probably in my top 10 favorites. I really like this episode, and I had such a blast with it, and it got me interested in Death Battle Season 9 a lot more than I actually was. I'm gonna be honest here. While I did enjoy episodes like Tanjiro vs. Jonathan, Thor vs. Vegeta, Omni-Man vs. Homelander, Magneto vs. Tetsuo, they just felt like stuff we've seen before. And admittedly, that is due to the fact that this is probably the very first mythology-based death battle. And where they don't focus on like a comic book version or an anime version or anything. But this episode is really cool. And I would go so far as to say that this is probably in my top 10 favorite episodes of all time. The animation was fun, the voice acting was fun, everything about this episode was fun. And that's what I wanted most. Not only that, but freaking A Hero's Journey is a banger track. Theirwolf Media killed it. This is basically what Dumplings and Dragons should have been. I can't give this score any lower than a 9.5. I mean, it does have its problems that kind of hold it back from a 10, in my opinion, but it's still a great episode and my favorite of the season so far. And I'd go so far as to say this is probably the best of the season so far. So, yeah, those are all my opinions. That's really all I have to say. I want to thank you all so much for joining me on this endeavor. I also want to thank you all so much for basically almost getting us to 1,000 subscribers. It really means a lot to me that you guys are enjoying this video, or these videos. And I also want you to give me your opinions of this episode in the comments below. Also, give me your opinion on this kind of video format where I do a prediction first and then I do a entirely separate video for a review. Do you want me to do that more often or just switch up my regular style to this? Let me know how you guys feel. Personally, I kind of want to separate the predictions and the reviews into separate videos. That way that anyone can just, like, if they don't want to watch a prediction without skipping to the review, then they could just watch the review instead separately. So yeah, that's really all I have to say. Thank you all so much for watching. I will see you in the next video. Take care, guys.
Oh, and I forgot that I'm not taking a break this summer. I'm still gonna be making videos during the summer while I'm not at school. So there are gonna be more videos coming out this year. So that's cool.